Okay, so I'm going to start off with a few announcements, and then our speaker will be ready to present. I'd like to first welcome everyone to our January meeting, family and friends, and lots of others. Tonight's meeting will be on Sri Lanka birding with John Glover, and I can't wait to hear about his trip. He was there for over 3 weeks and had a great time. Our meetings are always held on the second Thursday of each month, and we go through our May meeting, and then we're off for the summer. So February's meeting is on February the 8th at 7 p.m. I'm assuming we're going to be at the Napa Valley Lutheran Church, and the program is called Internet of Wings with Nathan Peplow. Nathan has spoken with us before. He's a professor at the University of Colorado and a specialist in bird song. And he's going to share with us some of the amazing things that are coming as the result of AI and how it's going to transform birding. And if you've used Merlin, you know that AI is already transforming birding because Merlin can identify probably 95% of the birds it picks up in the recorder, and it does it pretty accurately. So, and it's getting better and better all the time. So AI is going to have a profound impact on birding. Just to give you a sense, he believes at some point in the near future, you can look at a bird and you'll be able to tell where it was born and where it's traveled from. So if they put banding mechanisms on that particular bird. So it's really going to be really fascinating to hear Nathan's speech or a presentation. Nathan is the person who gives all of the expert birders the vocalization quizzes at conferences like the Western Field Ornithologist Conference and the Central Valley Bird Conference. He's a great guy, and he's been fun to bird with. So my next announcement is to thank everyone for contributing to this fall and winter's appeal fundraiser. We had over 100 people who contributed, and we raised over $10,000, which will really be huge in funding our education programs, especially. I found out we didn't get one of the grants I had hoped we were going to get. So the appeal will really be helpful. And it also will help support our citizen science projects. We're starting a new project with kestrel boxes, American kestrels. We're going to put some boxes out. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep. So the fundraiser is huge, and I want to personally thank everyone for contributing to that. We also gained quite a few new members as a result of the appeal, and that's really spectacular. We have very close to 400 members now in our organization, which is great. National Audubon in our area, the same area, has about 800 members. So we're almost half the size of the National Audubon group that's in our area. It's fantastic. Tammy Saunders is our part-time education coordinator, and she is taking fantastic programs into the classrooms in 4th and 5th grade. And Jane Hicks over here is helping her. And I'm doing some in Fairfield as well. And so we're trying to move into Solano County more and more because we've been centered in Napa where Tammy lives. So we're excited about expanding that. Also, just to encourage everyone, we have weekly bird walks with Andrew Ford, and he's a great naturalist. He's a fantastic birder, and every week he goes to somewhere different. On occasion, his work pulls him out of town and he can't lead a walk, but he sends out an e-blast each week, usually on a Wednesday or Thursday, telling people where he thinks we should go that week. So he's taking a close gander of where the birds are showing up and trying to go to some of the best spots. So don't miss out on that. That's usually on Saturdays, but sometimes Sundays. Last Sunday, they went to the Robinson Road area of Solano. Did anyone here go with him? Carol went. How was it? Oh, it was cool. Yeah, very birdie. Did you see some hawks? Yeah, great. So there are lots of ferruginous hawks out in that area, and sometimes a rough-legged. Did you see a rough-legged? Any rough-leggeds? Oh, Carol. Okay. Well, we've just also wrapped up our 2 Christmas bird counts. Robin Leong here has coordinated the count, the Benicia count since, you told me the date, but I can't remember, since 38 years. Okay. So he is hoping to retire, and Tom Sliker may be taking over. We'll see if Tom is up to the task. And Robin has done a phenomenal job. We're probably had close to 100 people out birding on the, what was the date? The 19th of December. The day was cold and windy, but the rain didn't start, fortunately, until about 3 o'clock. So most of us were able to get in our birds. There were some exciting birds seen, black rails, and one of the exciting birds that was found either that week or shortly thereafter by Roger Muscat was a neotropic cormorant. And for those of you who don't know, neotropic cormorants are really from Central America and Mexico, and they've slowly been working their way north. And Roger found one on Grizzly Island Road. Yeah, so a bunch of us were there the next few days looking at it, and it was usually perched up on one of the huge electrical wires. And some of us found it on a little pond, and we got some great photos of it. So the other count that we do is called the Angwin count, and Murray Berner is the coordinator for that. And we had a great day. Again, the weather was actually too beautiful almost. It's sometimes better to be a little bit overcast, but we saw over 130 species, and some of the highlights from that included varied thrushes, burrowing owls, ferruginous hawks, and Lucas found a black-throated gray warbler that's overwintering, which is very rare. And then for the first time, I found a yellow-bellied sapsucker. And that's a very rare, it's an eastern bird. And we found one a few years back. Lucas, of course, found it. But this time, Lucas took off to go find a rare bird that turned up in Marin. And so he left me in charge, and so I had to find something rare. So yellow-bellied flycatcher. Let's see. A yellow-bellied sapsucker, sorry. I also saw a yellow-bellied flycatcher up in Humboldt a couple weeks ago, so I get them confused in my poor brain. Also, what's turned up recently in the Napa area, there is a sage thrasher along the railroad tracks at Huchica. And it's been there for at least several weeks, and it will probably continue overwintering there. So if you want to see a sage thrasher and you walk west on the railroad tracks for about 3/4 of a mile, it's hanging out in that area near some eucalyptus trees. And then lo and behold, Bob Frescura, who's been a longtime member, had a Harris's sparrow come to his feeder, and it looks like it's staying there all winter too, and he lives up in St. Helena. So if you've never seen a Harris's sparrow, it's a Midwestern bird. Usually every once in a while we'll find one out here, but it's a pretty rare bird and a pretty fun bird to see. It's a beautiful sparrow. So coming up in the next couple months, National Audubon's Climate Watch Research Project is going to get started here January 15th. We go out and monitor spots in Napa and Solano County. So if you're interested in joining a team, let me know, and we'll have you go out with one of the teams. It's fairly rigorous birding. We usually hike 2 or 3 miles, and we stop every 400 yards and do another survey. So, but it's a lot of fun, and we do one session in the winter in January, February, and we do another session in the spring, May and June. And our target bird is the white-breasted nuthatch. So some groups target the western bluebird. We have a lot of western bluebirds because of all of our bluebird boxes. So we target the white-breasted nuthatch, and it's an indicator species of what's happening to birds with the climate that is facing us. Another big program that's been going on all year is Tom's phenology network surveys that happen. He does Mondays in American Canyon wetlands, and is it Wednesdays?
Yeah, Wednesdays.
Wednesdays at Benicia Community Park.
Yep.
And they go out every single week, 50 weeks a year, and they survey the birds in those two places. And that research is bringing data on when birds arrive, when birds leave, if they migrate, what birds overwinter, what birds don't overwinter. So it's a great project, and Tom's been doing it now for
6 years.
5 or 6 years. That's
Carol's involved and Patty's involved.
Yeah, incredible dedication that you guys have for that project. So the last program that's starting up in March is our bluebird box monitoring. And we have, I think, about 30 monitors. And for the last 2 years, we've had almost 500 fledged Western bluebirds. It's a fantastic number. And if you live anywhere near my network, near my house, near Alston Park, where there are boxes, the bluebirds are all over our neighborhood right now for the winter. So it's really, really heartwarming. Our monthly field trips, Carol Boykin is in charge, and she works with Wendy Cole and Bruce Thompson. And our January trip is this Sunday to Hill Slough Wildlife Area and Grizzly Island Road. And you're going to be led by Larry Kent, who's one of our members and a great birder. And that should be a really fun trip. February's trip is a 2-day trip, and it's up the Central Valley to the wildlife refuges to look at geese and other waterfowl. It's the 3rd and 4th, I believe, of February. It's a Saturday, Sunday. And these trips fill up with lightning speed. Typically, they're filled by the end of the day when the announcement comes out. So if you're interested in joining that group, sign up for the field trip notices. And as soon as you get your email, sign up. And yeah, yeah. Okay, so next, yeah, the Central Valley is amazing right now. Just hundreds of thousands of snow geese, Ross's geese, and white-fronted geese, and lots of ducks. It's a great time to be out there. So don't miss out on that if you can. Let's see. Okay, so we also have, besides the beginners walks that Tom talked about, we have junior Audubon walks for kids that Tammy leads, usually about 1 a month. She had a great owling session up in Alston Park. We actually had a barn owl come right over our group. It was really exciting. Tammy also led the CBC for kids, and that was centered at Connolly Ranch. We had over 20 participants this year. It was really nice. We went to 2 different locations, and the kids observed 45 species of birds, which is really good. Next, we have on display here at our meeting some of our new Kestrel t-shirts that Carol brought. Pam Condos is in charge of that. But if you're interested in seeing a t-shirt, if you're here, you can look at them. If you're not, you can go online, and we have pictures of them online in an order form, and we're selling them through Shopify, which is connected to PayPal. So it works just like donating or membership. You can just click on it, let us know your size, click on that, how many you want, and boom, you can order them right online without leaving home. Yeah, oh, well, yeah, they're both men's and women's. Yeah, nothing but that. So Lucas wants to challenge the birders in this group. For those of you who don't know, Lucas is my 18-year-old son. He just turned 18, and he started birding when he was 8. And he's way surpassed my birding skills and many other people's birding skills. But he wants to challenge members of this group to see 200 species by the end of February. So he's up to over 160 right now. And basically he goes to school full time. So he usually just birds on the weekends. So he wants you to get out there and get birding. There's some great birds showing up. There was a herring run in Richardson Bay by the Audubon Society, just thousands of gulls and ducks. there's so many scaup ducks, you can't count them all, probably 10,000 scaup ducks. So when the herring runs come in, they lay their eggs, and the gulls come in to eat those eggs as well as the ducks. It's really incredible. We just actually got back in time for the CBC on January 1st because we were up in Humboldt, and we went up there because other people had discovered some really rare birds. There's a yellow-bellied flycatcher. There's a dusky capped flycatcher, and the third one. What's the third bird that's up there? Help me out, somebody. But while we were there, Lucas found a least flycatcher, which is equally rare, and he found what else did we find? We found, gosh, my memory is terrible. A trumpeter swan, among other things. There's a purple gallinule up there from Florida and Texas, and it's the first, I think it might be the first state record or close to that. And it's a real tricky bird. It doesn't ever want to come out. I waited one day 4.5 hours and didn't get to see it. So I wouldn't send you up there for the purple gallinule, but you can see the yellow-bellied flycatcher, which is a great bird. So we found a least flycatcher, and we found he found the second county record of a field sparrow. And then we turned around the next day and found a tree sparrow. So these are both really rare eastern birds, and there they were. And we got great photos of all of them. It was wonderful. So let's see what else I can talk about. So that's the challenge to birders. Get out there with your binoculars, 200 birds by the end of February. It's easy. Make sure you go. This is John. He's home. He's ready to present. Great. Hey, John, I'm 200 species. Yeah.
I'm here. The program's all intact. We're fine, ready to go.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm introducing you now. I will introduce our speaker. So tonight's speaker is John Glover. He's a longtime member, and he and his wife have taken a lot of trips in recent years. And his most recent trip was to Sri Lanka. I can't wait to hear John talk about Sri Lanka and all of his experiences there. What interested me the most about what John sent me was his biography. He grew up in Palo Alto and started birding in the grade school, exploring cow pastures and creeks in the Palo Alto area. His love of nature continued to grow as a Boy Scout. He became an Eagle Scout, probably got the bird watching merit badge. It involved in an undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan in natural history interpretation. He had a number of jobs related to that in teaching. And most recently, he's been a teacher. Is it medical students?
Yep.
Yeah, at Touro University. So what an amazing career John has had. Are you a actual MD, John? I think you are.
I'm an osteopathic physician. Same licensure and everything else, and practice rights.
That's
different letters after the name.
Yeah. So John has had the pleasure of birding in all the continents and many countries, and he was our vice president for a number of years. So I'm going to turn the program over to John. So John, I'm going to have you share your screen as soon as I can figure out how to do that. Here we go. Here we go. Let's see. More. Make a co-host. Make a co-host. So you should now be able to share your screen. And the way you do that is by clicking on the share screen button at the bottom of your screen. And then you should have your PowerPoint. It's coming up. There we go. So success. It works, and it's in presentation mode. So,
yes.
So John, speak up and take it away.
All right, Mark, thank you very much. I apologize I still don't know what happened. I got a call from an old friend that I hadn't talked to for many years. And right as I was packing up to leave, and I thought I had downloaded it on the drive I brought with me. And when I got to the library, it wasn't there. So it's here, but I still don't know where here is. So, but it's there. So we won't worry about it. Um, as Mark mentioned, I have had the great pleasure of traveling around the world a fair amount, and I've birded for a long time. And it's just always been a hobby that has been not unable to be exhausted in terms of where I want to go and what I want to do. So this happened to be a trip that recently got back from. I got a contact saying, asking if I might have a program to do, and I said, "Well, I don't, but I can do one. When do you need it?" And so it was this date, and I said, well, "Okay, that's going to be quick, but we'll try." So I went through a little over 37,000 images and then culled them down to about 500 and then started culling those down. And anybody that does this knows that it's sort of an impossible task. So we'll go and see where we are. But Sri Lanka was a country that wasn't necessarily on my radar as something place I had it to be, but someone came to me with a wildlife trip that sounded really good price, and the accommodations, everything sounded good. So I thought, well, what the heck, why not? So I signed up for it, and then it was canceled because it was just before COVID hit. So it was 3 years put off. Are we going to go? Are we going to go? And finally, this year we went and just came back about 2.5 weeks ago. So Sri Lanka, just a little bit of a background. People may probably knew more about it than I did, but one of the parts that interested me was I just thought it was sort of an extension of India, which in a sense it is, but it really is an island nation. It's attached by a little spit off the southeast corner of India, but it's not very big. It's about the size of the state of West Virginia, but it takes a long time to get around it because the roads and the infrastructure is not real well developed other than around the capital. That's a nation of about 22 million people as of 2020. And they have managed to balance their religious backgrounds very well. They started out initially being completely Buddhist, and then as more people came from India came in, the Hindu portion increased, and then don't know much about where the Muslim component came from. And I'll talk about the Christian part in just a minute. But basically, what happened is that settlement started out of India with the Sinhalese in the right around the BC area, right just before that transition. And basically, it was a fairly wild country. It wasn't for a long time until the first kingdom was formed, and that didn't even necessarily include every part of the country. But the high points are basically the kingdom got weak. India kept attacking, never completely took over the whole country. But the Portuguese came in at one point and asked if they could trade in cinnamon. And like many of these colonizing nations, what comes in as a request oftentimes is just the front action. So they basically worked with the king, and then they said, "Well, we need a place to sort of have home. So can we build a fort?" So here you have another foreign country saying, "Can I build a fort in your country?" So they built a fort in the southwest part of the country, and then basically forced the king to sell cinnamon to the Portuguese at their price that they set. So they made lots of money off of the nation. But basically, what happened is they were there starting around the 1500s. And then after the king, some of the other people got tired of having the influence of the Portuguese. Somebody asked for the help from the Dutch. So the Dutch said, "Well, sure, we'll come in and help as long as you pay for it. So you pay for it, we'll come in and help." So they never left. So they came in and they helped. They kicked out the Portuguese basically until the British came and kicked them out. So Portuguese were around 1500. About 100 and a little over 100 years later, the Dutch came in, and another about 200 years after that, the British arrived, and they finally got their independence in 1948. So it's an interesting country. They work very, very well together. It's a very friendly nation. They speak English. So if any of you wish to go and you're worried about language, pretty much everybody in the country speaks 3 languages. There are 2 major cultural groups within the country, but everybody speaks English, and that's taught in school. So it's a very easy place to travel and communicate in, whether you're talking about buying something from a stand or whether you're going to a hotel or into a restaurant. Very easy to get around. So the country itself, and depending on who you listen to, about 528 species of birds, 34 of which are endemic. And the group that I went with, our total list was 258, so not too bad, and got almost all of the endemics. So we'll see this bird here, but the national bird is the Sri Lanka jungle fowl. So this was a tour that was organized. It's out of the United Kingdom. I would highly recommend them. They're very relaxed. They're not high intensity. If anybody has been on some of the field guides or some of the other rock jumper, and some of those can be fairly intense. If you're a diehard birder, it's great. But if you want to have your partner with you, they might balk a little bit at the intensity. Charlene said, I like seeing birds, but not for 8 hours without a break. So it was a good experience. It's a husband and wife team, and they do a really nice job. And it's not just about birds. The birds are the focus, but whenever there's any wildlife, his wife loves dragonflies, damselflies, and butterflies. So we spent a lot of time looking for and at them as well. So it's called Experience Nature, and it's basically experiencenature.co.uk. And they do mostly trips around the United Kingdom, also some up into Scotland, Ireland, and Ghana is the other out of the area place that he goes to. So you see this map of Sri Lanka, and if you look down in the southwest is where the capital of Colombo is located. And that's where the major population center is. That's where the major roads are. That's where the major business, everything is happening there. Most of the rest of the country is pretty rural and agrarian. So that means you have 4-lane highways right when you're around the capital, but once you leave, you get down to 2-lane roads, and eventually you usually end up in either 1-lane roads, sometimes dirt, sometimes not, and sometimes the 2 lanes each way become 1.5 lanes. So it can be a challenge traveling some of these back roads, and we were traveling in a bus. So we had to leave the bus at times to switch to 4-wheel drive vehicles so we could get around to see what we were looking for. So the flight from San Francisco, I went through Singapore, 17.5 hours, long flight. Then I had a 16-hour layover. So I thought, well, I'm not going to walk around the airport for 16 hours. So I basically had some bags I could check at the airport, and I went to the wild bird park that was just being dedicated, just been expanded. And Wild Bird Park is huge. I mean, it's I can't remember how many acres it is, 40 acres, or it's a huge place. I mean, the aviaries are big enough for hawks and hornbills to fly in without any obstruction whatsoever. And they have it divided up by regions of the world. So it's if you go through Singapore and you have a long layover, I highly recommend it. So then there was another flight, another 6 hours to get to Colombo. So we didn't get in there until almost midnight, and then an hour drive from the airport to the hotel, so we were sort of dead, and I was definitely dead because I hadn't slept at all. And we got up the next day and joined the group. So we had breakfast by ourselves. The group came in around noon. And in the early afternoon, I got a telephone call from one of the leaders saying, we're going to do a little birding out front if you want to join us. So that's where we start. So we start with we literally were just standing in front of the hotel itself. And one of the groups that, if you've done some international birding, you may be aware of are the babblers. And the babblers they're wonderful, wonderful creatures, come in a lot of colors and forms and shapes. So this little yellow-billed babbler was the first thing that we saw. It was just out on the driveway out in front of the hotel. And as we continued to move around and look, a little beast that many people have been the Asian area have seen before. This is an oriental magpie robin, and there you may see them in the wild, in forest. You may see them in the cities, in gardens. You may see them in around buildings. They're fairly ubiquitous. So this is the female, and oftentimes you'll see that tail is oftentimes perked up. It doesn't usually. Sometimes it's down, but oftentimes it's perked up at that position or even a little bit higher. And this is the male, darker, and in the right light, this bird becomes a beautiful iridescent blue as the shimmer. Otherwise, it just looks black in the shade, but it has a bluish shimmer or shading to it, sort of iridescence. Then looking around, another bird that's pretty common in these city type areas, but you also see in the forest is another one of the bulbuls. This one is called a red-vented bulbul. And it shows this image specifically so you could see, because you oftentimes don't see the red vent tail feathers. They're just below the tail feathers. So those red vent is very obvious in some and in the right stance, and other times you can't see it at all. So again, a member of this bulbul family, and the bulbuls and the babblers, you'll see a lot of these as we move through the country. Another group, as we're looking around, as we started going, the grounds, it was an interesting hotel. It was right on the beach. So we had a spit of sand and a little bit of forest, and then some gardens around the hotel. And a family that many of you may be aware of, this, from this one look, people probably can pick out the group. And that tail is very distinctive, and it's a group called the drongos. And drongos have these long tail feathers that fork and form this forked appearance, and then the colorations vary quite a bit. But this one happens to be a white-bellied drongo, which we saw again further on. And I'll show you it turned around later. But at this point, we were looking in the foliage around the rooms and on the lawn and in the trees. And one of the first things we saw was this gorgeous flash of yellow. And this is a black hooded oriole. One of the most beautiful things, that, like many orioles we have here in the U.S., over there, their orioles are also gorgeous. And it was interesting. Trying to photograph this bird was a challenge because it depended on the light. Sometimes it would look like it was yellow. Sometimes it would look like it was orange. And so it depended on really on the light that it was shown under, just like some of this iridescent that you see. But this gorgeous, really pretty, just jumps out at you as you see. Another thing you want to note on this bird is this bright red eye, which was very common. I was surprised at how many birds in Sri Lanka had red eyes. Not all of them, but it was very common to see that. So this little beast followed us around. We saw this almost every day throughout the trip. Another group. So in the U.S. we have our hummingbirds that go for nectar and work on the flowers. In Africa and in Asia, that niche is filled by sunbirds, and the sunbirds are fun to watch. They're cute. They're little bitty things. They don't have the flight pattern and the flight ability that our hummingbirds do, but they're basically filling the same niche. And they have used oftentimes as a curved bill, and the length of the bill and the degree of curvature can vary tremendously. But these guys come in a lot of colors and a lot of iridescence. So this is the male, and even though it's called a purple-rumped sunbird, I don't know where the name comes from. It has purple on its throat, it has blue on its head, it has yellow on its chest, but I don't know where the purple rump comes from, because this shows you that there really isn't anything. This is a full breeding plumage male, but the sunbirds are also can be frustrating because and again, depending on the light, if you see them in the shade, all of that iridescence, it's all structural coloration, and so it's just basically black. Again, as we are continuing working around, this is an Asian coal, pretty good sized bird. It's bigger than our jays. And this is the male, again, that bright red eye, everything else just jet black. And it honed in on these berries, these uh, yellow berries that have an inner core that's orange. And it sat there for a while and feasted on these berries, just tossing them into its mouth. So I got a couple good shots. This was just on a little palm tree that was up against the side of the hotel itself. And as we are looking out more, another bird that popped up was this incredible brown-headed barbet. Again, this beautiful deep green. And the barbets are another widely spread out family of birds. They come in a large color range. We'll see a number of them on this presentation. And we don't have any in the US, but if you go to Asia or Africa, but especially Asia, you'll see them all over the place. They're a wonderful group of birds and have a wild variety of sizes and colorations and habits. Then we saw a few other things, not in very good light, but basically this was sort of our warm-up. We actually I don't think we got more than 50 feet outside the front door of the hotel, and we actually saw about 10 different species. So it was a nice chance to get warmed up, and that evening we met each other. Some of the group had been on trips before with this group, and we all came together. It was also, anybody that's been on a group tour knows the most important part of a group is coherence. And everybody doesn't have to be the same. They don't have to think the same. They don't even have to want to do the same things. But if everybody respects each other and is courteous and kind, the trip goes wonderfully. If you have somebody that doesn't care about other people, it's a miserable trip. And we had a great trip, fortunately. Everybody worked well together, shared information, helped each other out with birds, with camera information. So it was a wonderful trip. So this second day was a long, almost 8-hour bus ride haul from Colombo up to the northeast part of the country. So basically nothing was happening at that point. We went to a number of parks, and the parks are not super developed, which is wonderful. I mean, there are roads. They're all dirt roads. The entrances are usually paved, but they're dirt roads, and they are restricted in who can come in them. You have to pay a fee, which isn't that much. But you basically have to go into most of the parks in a safari vehicle, which helps to keep things under better control. So this first park that we went to was one of the two parks that was known for having leopards in them. So people were looking forward to potentially seeing leopards as well as the birds. This is an example of the kind of roads, again, during the dry season, which is what this was, and there's a fairly extended dry season. The roads were fine. We had a couple days where we had rain, but we never got to the point where we really got stuck or had any real problems. But this is a typical road through the national parks. And the habitats in the parks are quite varied, as they are in our own national parks. And as we came around this one corner, I mean, I'd expected to see Indian peafowl, but I wasn't expecting to see it 50 feet up in a tree with a monkey. So this is an Indian peafowl with all of its regalia and the huge tail feathers, having no problem moving around and moving up through this fairly good-sized tree with a Sri Lankan toque monkey. So the monkey didn't seem to be bothered by the peafowl, so they stayed there for a while. I got a chance to get a couple of shots, but it just was an odd thing. I'm used to them being on the ground and doing their thing on the ground, but this was, as I say, it was way up in a tree. So a couple looks at I don't ever get tired of peacocks. I actually, when I was a kid, it was about six or eight, we went to the San Diego Zoo, and I was enthralled with the peacocks and this. I thought, boy, I wonder if one would drop a feather and I could take a feather home. So I started following the peacocks, and my sister started following me. And then my mother said, if you don't come, I'm going to leave. So she did one of these fake mom moves, which I didn't know at the time. So she left, but she didn't really leave. But when I turned around, she wasn't there. So, but okay, this isn't good. So I took my sister's hand and I went to a security officer and said, I'm lost. So he took me to the lost and found. So my poor mother, who was mortified as the announcement came over the loudspeaker, well, the mother of John and Lynn Glover, please report to lost and found. So I learned not to leave her alone, and she learned not to make statements that she wasn't ready to follow on. But so the peacocks were great. I found the peacocks. This is one in full display on the left, and on the right is also in full display, but they're as pretty almost from behind as they are from the front. And these males, when they get into display mode, you've probably seen this in some of the botanical gardens or parks in the US, they will display to almost anything, and they don't even need a female. We saw them displaying to deer. We saw them displaying to mongoose. The males just get into displaying, and it's like, okay, there's a live body. Let me show you what I can do. So, but just gorgeous, just an absolutely beautiful bird. Even though it's fairly common in the U.S. in parks, it's nice to see them in the wild, in the forest. They aren't native, but they've come over from brought into the parks hundreds of years ago and are now part of the ecosystem in the wild. Next one of these white-browed. This is a little bit ratty. It was a rainy day. And this one is one of the group. Again, you'll see a lot of different color ranges of these, but they fill the niche of like a mockingbird, looking for insects and things in the vegetation. Then as we continued along, this is the national bird. So this is a Sri Lanka jungle fowl. And the jungle fowls are the forerunners of our domestic chickens. It's easy to see. You've probably seen some of the nicely colored birds from place to place. In Indonesia, we saw a different jungle. This was a green jungle fowl. This one instead has a beautiful bright red comb with the yellow center and all the gorgeous iridescence as it moves through the forest. And they behave just like chickens, just as you'd expect, but they're moving through the forest. The female is brown, less colored, but better adapted to moving through unknown, whereas the males easily can be seen. As we go through, and again, you're always on the lookout. People have said, why do you like birds? I said, I love birds in themselves, but one of the things that I love about birds is birds are everywhere. It doesn't matter whether you're in a rainforest, in a desert, in the grasslands, in a marshland, in the open sea, they're birds. So by having birds as a sort of a thread to keep you focused on where you're going and where you are, it gives you a chance to stop and look at other things. So one of the things we saw were these star tortoises, real pretty little things. And unfortunately, because they are pretty, they are endangered because they're pretty. So people, the wild bird trade endangers birds and also reptiles and amphibians. People collect a lot of different things. And unfortunately, turtles and tortoises are one of those things. So this pair was trying to have a little privacy, I guess, and just enjoying themselves out in the meadow. Another big group that we saw comes in a lot of variety. This is a common kingfisher, and the blues on these, you'll see these, there are several of these things as we go through. This color pattern is also not unusual for a number of birds as either a black with iridescent blue back and a rufous breast. So this is a fairly small little kingfisher, and they are pretty widespread, so it's not unusual to see them, but they don't stay put well. I had trouble getting pictures of these things because every time that we'd find one, they'd take off as soon as they saw us. But very, very pretty. Another kingfisher, a bigger kingfisher, and this one, depending on whether you approach it from the front or the back, looks quite different. So you can see on the left, The lower one, this is a white-throated kingfisher, easily and very nicely named. And so from the front, you have this rufous brown with a white neck. But if you approach it from the rear, it has this, again, this beautiful iridescent blue plumage. So depending on which way you look at it, you're going to get a very, very different look. As you're going through the forest and surveying the areas, we were, just to give you a little description, the vehicles we were in, it was nice. So there were 20 of us total with the 2 guides and the 2 tour people, and then the 15 of us. There's usually one other person that oftentimes is there. So about 20. So we broke up into 4 safari vehicles, which was great. Instead of stuffing us into one, we basically had 4 people and a guide. And the tour people that led, they knew the birds as well, so they were served as guides. So we had either the lead guide, the assistant guide, the tour leader, or his wife, and so everybody had somebody in their vehicle to help with bird finding and identification. And going around, also obviously it was nice to be able to have. So these vehicles held. There were 2 in the front on each side, so that would be 4 in the front, then another row of 4 for 8, and then another back seat for another 4 for 12. So we had 5 in a vehicle designed for 12. So we had enough room. You couldn't move freely, but you had enough room to move around. And for me, with the camera, is always a challenge because anybody that's used a long lens, and I'm not talking big long lenses, but they get in people's ways. The first time I had a long lens, I went um, to Borneo with my wife, and we went out the first night on a night watch to look for owls. And on the way out to get there, I had my I had my lens, and we saw a hornbill, and I swung around to see it, and I hit her in the head with the lens. And about the 3rd time I hit her, she said, "If you hit me one more time, I'm going to throw that camera out of the vehicle." So having room, another space beside you is very advantageous for photography. Now, this is a white-rumped Sharma. You can see the rump, and again, depending on how you approach it, sometimes those wing and long feathers, primaries, cover the white rump. And again, it has the same pattern of a rufous breast with a dark back, in this case, black, a little bit of a bluish sheen to it. A bird that as you go through bird books, you oftentimes take a look and say, "Oh, I want to see that thing." This was one of those things. So the paradise flycatcher. On the left is the female, darker colored, still very, very pretty colored. It's with a beautiful blue eye ring and the crest and the rufous back and white breast. On the right is a sort of a crummy, I shouldn't say crummy, it is a crummy picture. We only saw a male once, and it was deep, deep in the shrubbery and the bushes. So it just sort of hung out back there and said, "Yeah, I'm back here." But it is gorgeous white with the very, very long tail feathers, unlike the female. And when it flies, it streams this long tail behind it. So very, very, very pretty bird, and big dimorphism between the male and the female. Another barbet. This one is a crimson. This crimson color on this thing you can see on the facial pattern. And again, barbets oftentimes are basically green, and then the colorations vary, usually on the throat and the face. But this one, in fact, was out in the open nicely in a place where I can see it, and I got a decent look at it and a halfway good photograph. This next bird is a Sri Lanka green pigeon, and they're green pigeons. This was one of the endemics that's unique to Sri Lanka. Female is behind the male without these burgundy wings, but the male has these gorgeous burgundy wings. And we happened on a tree with 3 or 4 of them in it. we only saw, it's interesting, there's some birds on trips you see every day, other birds you see sporadically, and then there's some you just don't see much at all. There are a number of birds on the list where we saw a single individual on a single day, and that was it for the trip. These guys we saw a couple days, but very, very seldom did we see them. But really pretty coloration, typical behavior you'd see for pigeons, and about the size of our feral pigeons from the city. This one is a variable hawk eagle, and the hawk eagles are interesting. You may, if you know this bird, you may know it actually as a changeable hawk eagle. Same bird, depending on which bird book you look in, and there are different countries, they keep changing common names, just as we have been doing some. But this bird itself is beautiful and has these feathers that come off behind it and form this cresting pattern. One on the right was a bird that was on a big branch, and on the left finally came out and showed itself, and just a gorgeous, gorgeous patterning. Another big bird that has a crest that comes out, that it comes up and shows at times, is this crested serpent eagle. And serpent eagle, again, has a few feathers. They're laid flat in this photograph, but lovely bird, bright yellow eyes, pretty good sized eagle. And as you might imagine, it does eat a lot of lizards and snakes, and that sort of thing. So not too long after we saw this eagle itself, we saw this little guy. It's only about the diameter of your thumb, but this bronze-back tree snake was out sunning itself, and was fortunately not a good target for the bird, because it was perfectly out in the open. It would have been a good meal. Another good-sized bird is this gray-headed fish eagle. And we saw this bird way tall on the trees. We saw it in the forest. We saw it bathing in stream sides. So it's fairly ubiquitous. We saw this around a fair amount of time. But again, as its name implies, fish being its primary diet. And so it spends a lot of time in and around the water, like our ospreys and bald eagles. We're moving along, and we saw this turtle in the middle of the road, and finally veered off. You can't get out of the vehicles. As I mentioned, this is one of the parks that has leopards in them, so you can't leave the vehicle. It's a Sri Lanka soft-shelled turtle. Moved around. It's about a little bit bigger than a good-sized painted turtle, and has this sort of hog nose that you see on the right that it breathes with. But neat little beast, walking along the road, and then finally veered off in the forest to find some water. These are native to India, these spotted deer, and there are a couple of species of deer that were brought into the parks basically as a food source for the leopards, so that the leopards stay put, so they don't go. The deer are kept inside the park for the most part, and so they're fairly common. I mean, it's not a rare thing to see them. Good set of horns, and these deer are ones that provide a good food source for the leopards, and they're actually their primary food source. This toque monkey, this is another variation of the one that you saw that was up in the tree with the peafowl early on. And this one actually happens to be sitting on the roof of one of the safari vehicles. If any of you have traveled to Asia or to Africa, these different species of monkeys you have to watch out for. They aren't necessarily dangerous, although the bigger ones can be. But the little ones are very quick to grab anything that they think looks interesting, especially food. So if you turn your head away from a sandwich or something that you're eating, and one of them is close by, it's going to be gone. So there were about 6 of these monkeys sitting around. We stopped. There's a little sort of a rest stop area in the middle of the park that's designed specifically for people to stop and have a lunch break. So that's the only place that and as a restroom. So it's the only place that you can actually get out of your vehicles was at this little rest stop. This one, not a great picture, but it was such a pretty thrush. Another one of the endemics, this orange-headed thrush, bright orange, deep orange, burnt orange, but did not come out to play. We only saw it twice and did not come out to play for a good picture, but I wanted to show it to you. So this is that little beastie. One of my favorite groups. First time I saw this are beaters. This is a green beater. You may see it in the books as an Asian green beater, as a green beater, as a little beater. It's listed several ways. It's the smallest of the 3 beaters in the country. And again, you see this red eye pattern. They are incredible flyers. They're not flycatchers in the true sense of being in that group, but they are experts at flight and at catching things out of midair. Like flycatchers, they'll find a perch, they'll be there for a while, they'll be off, find something, they'll come back with a fly or a bee or a butterfly or a dragonfly, and off and back all day long. So they were provided a nice opportunity to be able to take pictures. And this was this guy, just a gorgeous little beast. Another species, the second one, we only saw this guy twice, and this park was the primary place we saw it, was the chestnut-headed beater. Similar size, a little bit bigger than the green beater, but this pattern is fairly typical for beaters, having a yellowish throat or a one color throat contrasted against the breast, in this case green, and then this beautiful chestnut cinnamon headdress that it carries with it. Very pretty little beast. Again, similar patterns, finding a perch and then moving off the perch for flying insects and whatever it can get its bill on. This next one, there are 3 malcoas, and we saw all 3 of them. We saw this one several times, but again, trying to get a photograph of this beast was a real challenge. So again, it's a good sized bird. It's about the size of a magpie, and similar look and similar niche that it fills. But beautiful, this blue face on it with the blue around the eyes. Just a lovely bird. Long, streaming tail, and that's usually what you'd see. So you'd come into an area, as soon as it would see a vehicle or a person, it was gone. Next up, this is my favorite stork, as I've called a painted stork. On the left, you can see the immature in the front, the adults in the background. And then on the right, full adult plumage, this beautiful rose sort of coloration to the tail coverts, and then wings that are white and black. The black being that you see primarily when their wings are folded, and then white back and this orange head and bill. And the bill varies from a deep yellow to an orange. It varies from individual to individual, but they're, again, just a striking stork. Another stork, this is a woolly-necked stork, aptly named, as you can see from the feather pattern. And again, one that has this red eye pattern with a dark back. But we saw these several times, and much smaller than the painted stork. Painted stork is pretty good sized stork. This one's much smaller, closer to the ground. There were 2 different pied bills, hornbills that we saw. This is the Malabar pied hornbill. And at this one itself, the male is on the left in the background, the female. These are both males, but if you look at it, that top piece that's attached to the bill is called a casque, C-A-S-Q-U-E. And the male it is black. You see the black on the back edge. The male has a dark eye ring, the fleshy part, and a darker looking head. The female is blue. Two different types of crocodiles that you see in Sri Lanka. There's a saltwater crocodile, and this one is the freshwater called the mugger crocodile. This looks like a regular crocodile, with regular teeth, and sometimes they sit there with its mouth open, and sometimes they're in the water doing their thing. The lapwings and lapwings. This is a bird that in different countries, interesting. Some countries call them spur plovers. Some of them call them, so lapwings call them plovers. So they common name can vary different. This one's a red wattled lapwing. Just a striking. The wattles on this are not as extensive as another one that I'll show you, but still quite striking. And we saw this in the forest on the edge where there were waterways, and we also saw it in open waters and lakes, as well as streams and all sorts. So you see this anywhere, any place there was water, standing water. Similar to our stilt, this is a black-winged stilt. Again, they're such an elegant bird. These long stilt-like stilt legs that are this red pink. This one with the black wings contrasting with the white body, a little bit of dark on the back of the neck, but basically it's a black wings and then white-bodied bird as it moves around, just as you'd imagine as we do with our stilts. This is a group we don't have in the U.S. It's called the thick knees. This one is a great thick knee. And the other species is called an Indian thick knee. It has a little bit different pattern on the head. Another one of the waders that again the great thick knee we saw several times, but not a very common bird. But they stick out. They're decent size. They're not tiny little birds, but they're decent size, and with the size of their legs, they stick out. Marsh sandpiper. We saw a number of waders, and which was nice to get a chance to see some new shorebirds. The problem, I shouldn't say problem, for me, problem only is you love to see them in their breeding plumage. But since they're overwintering, they're coming down from further north. So during this time of the year, they're all in non-breeding plumage. So there were a lot of them that looked just like this. This one is a marsh sandpiper. We'll see some of these it has dark back, this brownish back with white breast without much in the way of patterning, and the eye stripe. Tiny little guy, another little plover, a Kentish plover. Tiny little guy scooting around just like some of our small plovers as it moves in and out of the surf. This one we saw in the freshwater areas, but again, much more striking plumage when it's in breeding plumage. Another one, as you can see, here's a common sandpiper, even less patterning on the back, and the coloration coming down into the neck, with a much more distinct eye line through the eye, and then as well as the one above it. And we finished the day after we got to this. We finally saw. We looked the entire day hoping to see leopards, and most of the people in the park are there to see leopards. So they race through the park at breakneck speeds. They're not supposed to, but they zoom through the park to try and find the leopard. So we're birding. So some of them got frustrated with us because what do you see? Because they'd see us with binoculars, and we're looking at birds. And so then they zoom off. But right at the end of the day, as we were coming out, we saw this leopard. It never turned around and looked at us, but it was in the low underbrush and didn't seem to be bothered. Now, mind you, if any of you that have been in safari vehicles, you realize that almost all safari vehicles are open. They're not inside a car. You are open. That allows for better air movement, allows for better photography, allows you to see better. And I don't think I've ever heard of anyone getting attacked, but they are open vehicles. So for people, the first time they go on a safari, to see a lion or a leopard or a big elephant in an open vehicle is a little disconcerting sometimes, but the animals basically look at the vehicle as they don't look at the people in the vehicle and say, oh, I can pluck one of them out. They look at the vehicle as what they're looking at. So you're looking at a pretty sizable thing. They're not going to attack it. But this leopard was kind enough to stay around a little while, but never was cooperative enough to turn and face us. As we were going out, only one of the four vehicles got to see the sloth bear. It's another mammal I've always wanted to see. They're very secretive. You don't very often see them. I've been in places where they were many, many times, but I've never seen them. But the first vehicle out saw them. And they also saw the dwarf pygmy kingfisher, which is another gorgeous little tiny kingfisher, only about 3 or 4 inches high. Really, really pretty, beautifully colored, but that's the only one that we saw on the trip. Next, we went up to the far north part, up into the area close onto the coast. And again, in the coastal areas, there are forests that goes right down to the coastline. And so you'll see forest birds that you would see further inland, right on the coast, as well as more saltwater or coastal birds. This white-browed bulbul is one that you can see in the forest in a number of different places, but it happened to be in this area. This one area that we went to for a hotel, we got rained on, so we got stuck. It was nice. It was just the afternoon. We spent most of the morning getting to the area, and we sat in an open area. It was covered, but in an open area, and we bird watched for where we ate lunch, and we saw a huge variety. This gray-bellied cuckoo being one of them. Indian robin. Again, you see this pattern again of a dark iridescent back with a rufous bottom. Really pretty little thing with its iridescence. This is a greater kukul. After it got wet, decided that to me, this is a fierce looking bird. I mean, with the feathers all ruffled out, trying to get them dry after the rainstorm, that black head contrasting with the very, very red eye. Let's see, Mark is sending me a message. Okay, so that's a time warning. No problem. Okay, so this is the greater kukul, and again we saw this guy from where we had lunch. The Jacobin cuckoo is another one that was moving around. These bushes for some reason had an infestation of caterpillars, so we had all kinds of things coming in to look at these birds. Sunbirds were coming in as well. This is another purple rump, a little more markedly colored than that first one that I showed you. The black-hooded oriole again popped up. Again, this thing was eating caterpillars right and left. That would come in, get its fill, and would leave for 10 or 15 minutes, come back again. So it came in and out multiple times. And this was a surprise. Again, we're at a hotel eating lunch, on this area and in walks a white-breasted swamp hen, which I wasn't expecting to see. We saw them out in the marshes, but as we came to find out, as we explored this hotel was built on a beautiful piece of property, and it was built on an area that has a marsh, and so they actually developed a walkway out into the marsh. So this place had the best food, had the nicest accommodations, and had, walking out your door, there were actually 10 feet out the door was an Indian pitta. So, which is we chased that little bugger around for days. But as we go through, this is so you have a bird that's in the swampy area that just happened to come ranging up in close to where we were having lunch. As you get out into this marshland, there are egrets everywhere in Sri Lanka. Everywhere. I mean, all sizes. So this is a little egret. Often has these, even when it's in non-breeding plumage, has these feathers coming off the back of its head. And it's very easy to distinguish, like our golden slippers with our little egret. This one has yellow feet as well. But there's a little egret, there's an intermediate egret, there's a great egret, and then there are a number of other herons and egrets that are some of the ones that we have here as well. One that was ubiquitous. We saw this bird every single day, and depending on how you saw it, either you saw the back with this beautiful brown, or when it flies, it looks almost pure white because all the feathers underneath the wings are white. So the whole body is white, and you go through just a beautiful little thing. And in the grass in the marsh area, small birds, the scaly-breasted munia, very pretty little beast. Another one that was mixed flocks with those little seeds you see, that was what it was feeding on, these little grass seeds. And this is again, the munias are sparrow-sized, pretty little birds. This one is a tricolored munia. You can see the three colors, bright chestnut on the back, and as well as the white and the black heading. One of the butterflies we saw throughout the country that was nice to see was this blue tiger. As mentioned that the tour leader's wife, she loved butterflies. So she had a butterfly book in her hand, not a bird book most of the time. But a lot of different species of butterflies. Eurasian collared dove, which was one that came in non-native, but this one we saw rarely. As we moved on to another sanctuary in this same area, tiny little flycatcher, Tickle's blue flycatcher. And again, you see this repeating pattern of this blue-black on the wings and on the back, and then the lighter orange, almost rufous on the chest. A little butterfly, this little little small salmon butterfly, gorgeous little creature. Those of you that know flowers, you may recognize the flower as lantana. It's I'm not sure if I've ever been any place in the world other than Antarctica that I haven't seen lantana. It's all over South America. You see it in Africa, you see it in Asia, and it attracts butterflies and hummingbirds and sunbirds, and it attacks every place it goes. So good to see. Roller, there's a beautiful roller in Africa. And this is the Indian roller. Again, similar look to the bird. It's a pretty good sized bird, sort of small crow sized, with a gorgeous turquoise and then a deeper blue. And when it flies, it just flashes the blue. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Another sunbird, Lowton sunbird. This guy, when it's in bright sunshine, it shines like a piece of metal. The feathers are so iridescent, and the camera did not like focusing on it. So very, very large down curved bill. The female is whitish and yellow, much lighter pattern, but the male is this just intense blue purple. Another one of the seed-eating birds, again, sparrow-sized, this ashy sparrowlark. We only saw this a couple of times, but again, we'd see it wherever we saw it where there were grassy areas, and they were feeding on the little weed seeds, whether it was along the roadside or at the edge of a stream or along a trail. As we started getting into this marsh area and more open areas, we were going out toward what went out onto the ocean. We started seeing more birds typical of the coast and inland areas. So this is a whiskered tern. Again, a much more striking, think of a Bonaparte's gull, these color changes between the non-breeding plumage and breeding plumage. Little ringed plover, again, lovely little bird around the marshlands, moving through the areas. Bird that sort of fits into our great blue. This is a gray heron, good size, like again, our great blue, big heron, gray, white with some black markings on it. Good sized bird. Another little guy, this little lesser sand plover, again, in and out of the areas in the mud, poking around for little crustaceans and arthropods in the mud. One of the crows that we saw every single place we went. This was a house crow. We saw them in the forest. We saw them on telephone poles. We saw them in the cities. They were everywhere. Another crow. This one also we'd see a lot. It's a larger crow. The bill is also, it's called a large-billed crow for the larger size of the bird and of the bill. But crow behavior, see them all over the place. A bird I was a little surprised to see in the salt water, this was again on the shoreline, was this white wagtail. That was in moving around, again, just moving around in the water, looking for anything it could find to eat. And a bird that I'd always wanted to see was a crab plover. And we only saw this single individual in the entire trip. And lo and behold, we watched it for about 20 minutes, and it was kind enough to catch a crab. So, as its name implied, it took it to the edge of the shore and basically beat the crab to death and ate it piece by piece. But pretty bird, a big, very robust bill. Another thing that was curious to see in these wetland areas, animals that were used for beasts of burden, so to speak, are now found feral in the parks and in other areas. So in this area here, there were a bunch of donkeys. And again, they don't belong to anybody. They're all feral. And they roam around and they eat what they can find and move around and seem to get along just fine. You can see that the ribs aren't showing. They seem to be in pretty good health. Eurasian spoonbill. Those of you who have been out east and seen roseate, this is a Eurasian and it's non-breeding plumage. It's another group. Not as striking. When it goes into breeding plumage, the feathers on the back of the head are yellow strands. It looks like it has rows of beads coming off its head. Just a really striking bird in breeding plumage. A little surprised to see the flamingos, but again, you can see immatures mixed in with the adults. And with their typical behaviors, they're fun to watch as they feed in the shallows. Another big eagle that's a pretty common bird to see, this white-bellied sea eagle. Little guy down lower, a little grebe moving around through the marsh. We saw one actually sitting on a nest. And again, as I mentioned, there are egrets everywhere. There are egrets on the marshlands. There were egrets in the rice paddies. There were egrets in the boats. There were usually a mixture, again, of sometimes, you'd see cattle egrets and little egrets and intermediate egrets, great egrets. They were mixed all over the place. Brown-headed gull, again, in its non-breeding plumage, not too striking, beautiful bird in terms of the coloration and breeding plumage. We had two pipits that are, on first look, are challenged to tell apart. This is a paddy field pipit. And the other one, which has less distinct markings on the wing and back, is this Richards pipit. We only saw this one day in one place, but they're pretty close in terms of where they look. Again, think of a meadowlark in terms of moving around through the pipits as they move around through the grass and looking for anything they can find to eat. Ducks were not too common, which was surprised me with all the wetlands that we went to. We saw lesser whistling ducks fairly commonly, but not much else. Another one of the storks, Asian openbill, and if you look closely, depending on how they hold their bill, the bill actually doesn't close tight. It actually has a space in between. You can see through the grass on the other side. But very, very pretty bird. Looks very much like the white storks, the common storks of Europe that migrate. Intermediate egrets. Now, if you look at the eye, if you'll notice where the gape of the mouth ends, it doesn't go beyond the eye, which is what makes this, if you're having trouble distinguishing it, an intermediate egret. If it had yellow feet, you'd know it was little. And the great egret will see one of those too. Butterflies, again, just lovely. All over the country, we saw these beautiful little things. The black-winged stilts, I can't get enough of them. They're gorgeous to watch, fly, land, take off, feed. Really enjoy seeing them. As we moved from this coastal area that was close to the spit of sand that connects to India itself, we went to Singiro. And this area, as were leaving, we saw people, they were bringing in the nets, with these boats. They would go out with these long nets that would go out several hundred feet. They'd bring them out with the boat, and then they'd bring them out into shore. Rice paddies you saw all throughout the country. Primary export, tea, rice, coconut products are the three major exports. But they produce 3 crops a year off of these. And this agriculture is very, very extensive throughout the country. Another drongo, the forked tail, you can see just one part of it, but very characteristic drongo, the way it habits, the way it sits, this more or less upright pattern, dark head with a white belly, and that forked tail, characteristic of drongos. This one is again, the Tickles blue flycatcher, another one that we'll see in a minute that's a bit different. Asian brown flycatcher, smaller than the Tickles, little tiny guy. Saw this fairly often, great big eyes. And they, again, see these moving around, open branches moving out, looking for insects. Large pigeon, larger than our feral pigeon. These imperial pigeons are big birds. You see them all throughout the South Pacific. You see them in Asia. They're a good-sized bird, and their backs usually look dark unless you get them in light where they may be green or different iridescence. But if you see them in the dark shadowy area, it just looks like they have black wings and a black back. A challenge is to try and catch swifts and swallows in flight. And I rarely get it, so I put this one in. The Asian palm swift is one that you'll see a lot, different places in the world, this big, broad, sort of boomerang wings with a long forked tail. Now, in older days, what happened was the water buffalo were used to work the fields. And now everything is mechanized. So we saw water buffalo in the fields once. Every other time we saw people work in the field, it was always mechanized, either with a tractor or these that were basically as a seat with controls and a motor that would turn over and till the soil for the rice. And then again, the egrets we saw. Transportation, this you can see is everything you typically see. The most common forms of transportation are motorbikes. So you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 people on a motorbike. That's what most people use for transport from one place to place. The tuk-tuks are used quite extensively, and you'll see hundreds of these all over the city. And then the other primary one are the buses. Most people do not have cars. So the major transportation are bus and tuk-tuk. And if you have enough money, getting a small motorcycle, but most people get around by the bus and the tuk-tuks. As I mentioned, in the country, I have never seen so many shrines in my life, but people would stop at the shrines, and the shrines varied from little small ones that maybe only be 5 feet tall to ones that may be, 60 feet tall. Buddhist, this one happens to be a Christian Catholic shrine. I haven't seen the Virgin Mary as much as I did on this trip, but there are Catholic shrines around, especially the port areas where the Portuguese were. And we spent one day going to this rock. This was a rock fortress that one of the kings, I won't tell you the story for time purposes, but basically this king, good king, did good things for his people. The first one born was not born to the queen, but one of his other wives, so he wasn't in line for succession. So when he got to be of age, he killed his father, and his younger brother fled until he got of age. And people didn't follow him because he killed the king and they liked the king. So he retreated to this place and he built this palace on top, one on top and one at the base of this thing. This was in about 500 AD. And his brother eventually came back and took him on. And in a battle with elephants, this elephant the king was on refused because of the slippery footing. It turned around and went back, and that's a sign to the troops that the battle's lost. So they all left the battlefield and ran, and the king ended up committing suicide. So weird story, but it's a neat fortress. This sign just cracked me up. It's like anything you might want to do, don't do it. Whether it's walking on the lawn, walking on things, looking at it. So it was an interesting place. Again, this was built around 500 AD. And this is the major place. They have uncovered the right side, but not the left side. And this is a long pathway that led through. This is a view from the top. It's a long path. There were fountains and ponds, and then there was a palace at the base of that rock I showed you. And the grounds are pretty much now occupied by toke monkeys for the most part. Some other, but it's partly overgrown. But to get up to the top of that rock, it was 1,700 steps. At the base is this lion's paw that forms this symmetrical piece, and this is part of the stairwork that goes up the side. Little many striped skink that was up there. Next year, you saw this tawny bellied bulbul as we go through. Little wood shrike, Sri Lanka wood shrike. Common dove that we saw a lot around the area. This spotted dove, very pretty little thing, but saw it a lot. Butterflies, this is again, plain tiger, real pretty. Crimson rose, one of the most beautiful butterflies I've ever seen. Another one of the endemics. This is a Sri Lankan swallow. Looks on first look and flight size, everything else about the same size as our barn swallow. Looks very much like it and flew with them. This is much rarer than we saw many more barn swallows than this Sri Lankan swallow. There are two white eyes, an oriental white eye. They both look very similar. The only difference is a little bit of difference coloration of the lores, and the oriental white eye is yellow-green, and the Sri Lankan endemic white eye is green-yellow. So it's just a little bit more greenish. Another this common Jezebel is what it's called, but the butterfly is just gorgeous. Second, this is a langur. There are two types of langurs that we saw. Gray langurs, they look like stately old men. Just enjoyed watching them. We spent on this day in transit. We stopped at a tea plantation and went through the whole process, went through the plant and how I learned a lot about how tea is grown. But one thing I didn't realize, if you look at the flower, you may recognize the flower style. Tea is in the chrysanthemum family. So that's the inflorescence or the flower for tea. And they can pick about every 3 or 4 days. Different teas are basically due to whether the tea is either aged or fermented and how fresh it's picked. The green tea and white teas are not fermented, and they're the freshest, youngest leaves. Victoria Park was a city park, but it's like a huge botanical garden. I mean, it had incredible varieties. This was one of my favorite birds, this violet-fronted nuthatch, just a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous little thing crawling up and down. Hard to see and a challenge to photograph, just like our nuthatches. They don't sit still. Little guy, tiny little thing, gray-headed canary, flycatcher. Saw these several times move around. It's a tiny little bird. Another small, this is a flycatcher shrike, a bar-winged. A lot of variations, but again, basically a flycatcher in terms of what it fed on. If you remember the tickles, this looks very similar. This is a cashmere flycatcher. And we only saw this at higher elevation. And that's where we were with this one. Another wagtail. You saw the white wagtail earlier. This is gray. You look at it and say, isn't this yellow? With the yellow wagtail has a lot more yellow in it. Just out walking around the grounds, walking across the lily pads, very, very casually out having a good time. This one, common tailor bird, little tiny. It's like chickadee size or common bush tit size, just a little tiny thing. Then we're just wrapping up, so we're almost finished here. This is a giant squirrel. This is about 4 times the size of our gray squirrel or fox squirrel. It's a big squirrel. We saw several owls, and we actually got to see all the owls during the daytime. So this is a little jungle owlet that we saw. We saw a couple others that were tucked up in behind places. Yellow was another park. We saw a huge variety of things here, a lot of which we've already seen. So I'm just going to finish up with a couple of things here. But Yala is another place that many people go to. This is the largest park and it's closest to the capital, so it's where more people go. More our friend with the painted stork, which we love. More Malabar pied hornbills. Again, male and the female, the male upper and the female lower. You can see the pink around. If you look closely, it's a light pink around the eye and lighter around the eye. They are just lovely to see. And our favorites are painted stork and this little guy. Again, they come back with an ant, a flying ant, a bee, whatever it was. So this is the third and final of the beaters. This is a blue-tailed beater. This is the largest of the 3 of them, and probably the most common. Again, they'd find their perch and they would sit there, and then off they'd go. And they have the almost crescent-shaped wings. They're just beautiful flyers. They're graceful to watch, and they almost never miss. It's amazing watching these things. And the finish to our day, we got rewarded. This literally, it was getting dark, and we were on our way out of the park, and lo and behold, somebody said stop, and this was leopard was just at the edge of the forest, looking back on the road. The other 3 vehicles in our group drove right past it, but we happened to catch it and happened to be looking at us. So that's where we saw that little guy. A couple left to finish up. This yellow wattled lapwing. Again, the wattles are much more extensive here. These bright yellow legs, kind of comical. Plain prinia, again, good insect. This is a little katydid that it got, type of insect that it has. This is a small warbler-sized bird. And that's it. That's the end. So I'll be happy to take any questions if anybody has any questions.
Hey, John, I'm so impressed with the quality of your photos and your knowledge. I learned a lot. I want to go to Sri Lanka now.
You would love it.
Our audience is just spellbound by your photography. It's really sensational.
Oh, thank you.
It's really fun. If you've done any international birding, you begin to learn the families that are ever present in each country, and each country has their own specifics of those families, but it's great to see these photos. Any quick questions for John? While we're doing questions, if anyone from the board can help me begin to clean up so we don't get in big trouble with the library, that would be nice. Any quick questions for John?
Is that a long day trip, John?
A 12-day trip?
It was a little bit longer because there was a little bit in front and the back. First day is always just sort of getting there. It took over a day to get to and from it. So it was about little over 2 weeks, but travel was 4 days. It was a great trip. As I say, I'll be happy to talk to anybody that wants to hear about this group. He's going to go back again. Like he's going, I think next year's trip's already sold out. The year after that, he's going back in January, and the waders and the shorebirds will be in breeding plumage.
Oh,
So
wow.
I may very well go back for that one. I'd do it again. It was a great trip. It was really pleasant, easy-going. Nobody got sick. I got a leech, but other than that,
Is January the rainy season, John?
the dry season goes through November. So by having this trip in December, they were pushing it, and so we got some rain.
Uh-huh.
But I can look it up, but it's about a 3 or 4 month dry period.
Okay. And Robin is wondering the cost of a trip like this.
It wasn't bad. I think it was around 5,000.
Robin's going to
Were
take
you-
me with him when we go.
Yeah.
Were you bothered by insects?
Yeah, were any insects or snake issues?
You know, it was interesting with the insects. We had people that slathered. I don't like either sunscreen cream or the insect repellents. Just as an FYI, if you don't not a photographer, and even because if you should know this for your binoculars, any insect repellent, especially that has DEET in it, they will destroy the coatings on binoculars and lenses. So
Interesting.
don't use spray. If you're going to use insect repellent, use lotion or roll-on. But the sprays, if they get on the lenses, they will eat up the
Interesting.
coatings.
Wow. Well, we can't thank you enough, John. We're sort of having to clean up, but it was a sensational program, and we're going to have you back for one of your other trips. Because
I'll take a look at Brazil. I went to Brazil this year as well. That was a fun one as well.
what camera did you use?
I have switched over to the mirrorless, so I have an R7 and an R5. I use the R7 more because it's not a full frame. The R5 I use if I want a full frame, and then a 100 to 500. So I have a 100 to 500 zoom lens with an R7 Canon body.
Great. Well, your pictures are stunning, and we really appreciate it. So because we have to leave in the next few minutes, we're going to sign off. Any participants on the Zoom have anything to say, you can unmute yourself. Any questions to ask or accolades for John's great talk?
Hey, John, we only have 6 people on our trip. It's 16 days.
Wonderful.
$2,500.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. No, that's great. Yeah, no, the trip was 3,000 before COVID, and it went up to 5,000 afterwards.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks ever so much, everyone, for joining us. Our talk next month is February the 8th, and it is a Thursday night again, and we will have both a Zoom and in-person meeting. We'll send out information on the location after I get a talk with Barbara. And for those of you interested in conservation issues, please don't forget to stay in touch with what's happening in Solano County with the potential megacity that Flannery Associates is planning. I have written personal articles to all the newspapers in both counties, and I believe they've already been printed. So keep in touch on that issue, because it's right in the heartland of fantastic birding area with endangered both birds and plants. So thanks very much, John. We really appreciate it. And
sorry for the late start. I'm glad it worked out okay.
Worked out just fine. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Take care.
Can you say the name of your company that you went with again?
It's called Experience Nature.
Thanks.
And if you go on, just put Experience Nature, the website will come up if you go into any of the search engines. And feel free to drop me a line. I'll be happy to talk to you about them. It's a really good company. I really enjoyed working with them.
Great, folks. I'm going to have to sign off because we have to leave the library, but thanks everyone for coming. We had 50 folks in attendance, Sean. Great talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.